Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Homemade. And today I am going to be showing you how to make a pecan upside down pound cake. Yes, pecan upside down pound. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over our ingredients really quick. We're going to use evaporated milk. We're going to use our 2 cups of granulated sugar. We are going to use our 3 cups of flour. Now, for this flour, you will need self-rising flour, and you also need all-purpose flour. If you all remember, for our layered cakes, I always use the 2.5 cups of self-rising flour and the half cup of all-purpose. Now, this time for my pound cakes, I flipped that. I use 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour and I use a half cup of self-rising flour. Since we're using more all-purpose flour, our rising ingredients such as our salt, our baking powder, and our baking soda, we are going to use a little more of that. We are going to use a full teaspoon of each. I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of vanilla. I'm going to use my 4 eggs, and I'm also, for this recipe, I am going to use sour cream. In here, I have 3/4 cups of sour cream. Yes, 3/4 cups of sour cream. Everything that's typically cold, like my eggs, my sour cream, and in this recipe, we don't have to worry about the milk. But everything is room temperature, including our imperial shortening. We're using 2 sticks of this. And also, we do not want to forget our vegetable shortening. This is a half a cup of vegetable shortening. I am going to toss in some toasted pecans, and it's just a half a cup. They're already coarsely chopped. And to toast them, I'm going to use 2 tablespoons, only 2 tablespoons. Now, I am using real butter to toast my pecan. So, let's go ahead and get started. All right. So right now, as you can see, we've melted our butter and we are getting ready to toast our pecans. We just want to toss the pecans in the butter really well before we prepare to put them on the cookie sheet that is lined with parchment paper. We're going to spread those out really evenly so they get a really good toast. Put them in the oven on 375 degrees for about 6 minutes. At this stage, as we're getting ready to prepare our pecan caramel topping, we want to make sure that we also remember to grease and flour our bundt pan before we pour that topping in. We're going to be using 1/3 cup of brown sugar, 1 full stick of butter. We're also going to use 1 cup of pecans, and we're also using 1/3 cup of corn syrup for this stage. And this stage is so very easy. And we also want to make sure that we remember to put in that tablespoon of vanilla extract. We want to melt our butter in the microwave, as you can see that we've done here. We want to go ahead and put in our brown sugar and our corn syrup. We're going to mix that really well with our hand mixer. If you don't have a hand mixer, don't worry, you can whisk it, but you want to make sure that that sugar is really incorporated into the mixture to keep from having that grainy, gritty texture in your caramel. So once we've mixed that really well, you're going to mix it for about 2 to 3 minutes again, just to make sure that that sugar is dissolved. As you can see, our sugar is dissolved. Now we want to make sure that we put in that tablespoon of vanilla extract, and we're putting that in at the end just to preserve the flavor so it doesn't get lost while we're mixing it. Once we get done mixing that for about another 45 seconds to a minute, we are going to just stir in our pecans. We don't need our mixer for this step. Again, as you can see, I just used my regular measuring spoon just to make sure that I coated the pecans really well before I got ready to pour it into my pan. And again, it is greased and floured to keep that topping from sticking to our pan once we get ready to flip our cake upside down. So we're just going to pour it in really well and get ready to pour our cake batter on top of that. Now, you don't want to make this too early, and you don't want to make it too late. At this stage, I'm just putting in my vegetable shortening and my 2 sticks of imperial, getting ready to cream those together as I'm preparing my cake batter. I'm going to cream those together for about 10 minutes in my stand mixer before I add that sugar in. And as you can see, it was just a really nice white color. I'm adding in my sugar, which is 2 cups, and I'm going to cream it for about 5 more minutes before I put in my vanilla and my eggs. Right here, I'm going to put in 2 tablespoons of our vanilla extract. Now, with our eggs, we want to make sure that they are room temperature before we put them into the mixture. And as you can see, it is really nice and creamy. Remember, the creamier that this mixture is, the better texture you'll have in your cake. Also, I'm cracking my eggs directly into my batter, but if you want to crack them into a bowl and pour them in one at a time, feel free. We're going to put our flour and our milk in 2 steps. And remember, we're not going to use the full can of milk. We're only going to use 1 cup of our evaporated milk. Once that's done, we're going to go ahead and scrape our sides just to make sure everything is evenly mixed in. We don't want any lumps or any leftover sugar that's not incorporated into our batter well. We're going to give that a quick swirl, really quick. We're going to go ahead and add in our sour cream at the end. Now again, we don't want to overmix this batter. Our pecans that we toasted in the oven for about 6 minutes, we're just going to toss those in that flour just to make sure they get really coated so that they won't sink to the bottom of our cake batter as it's cooking. So just toss those in. You may have to add in maybe a tablespoon or 2 just to make sure that those pecans are really tossed in that flour. Now we're going to add them to our cake batter, and again, as you see, we took our bowl off the mix and we're just folding those pecans into the batter. As we fold them in, we're going to go ahead and pour them over our pecan caramel topping and put it into the oven for 1 hour and let it cook. Our cake is not done at this stage, but if it's not done after that 1 hour in our 350-degree oven, we want to make sure that we're not cooking it for more than 10-minute increments. Our cake has been in the oven for another 10 minutes and it's time to check it. To check our cake, we're just going to use a regular butter knife, and the butter knife came out clean. This means that it is time for our cake to be removed from the oven and placed onto our cooling towel. Now, you want to make sure that your cake does cool for about 10 to 15 minutes, no longer, before you flip it out onto your cake pan or your cake plate. Now, as you can see, our cake is cool to the touch. That means that it is time for it to be flipped over, and we're just going to flip our cake over onto a regular plate. This step is really important. You want to make sure that your cake board or your cake plate does fit over your cake. And also, we want to make sure that we rim our cake before we flip it out of the pan. This is very important because it keeps our cake from sticking on the sides once we flip it out. Now, as you can see, I did put on an oven mitt just to be on the safe side, but our cake is cool enough that I don't need it. After I removed the cake, I did notice that there was some of the topping stuck in the top of the cake pan. And if that happens, guys, don't worry about it because you're able to scrape that topping out and just place it onto your cake with a butter knife or a spoon, and I promise you, no one will ever know the difference. This cake turned out so great. Again, if you would look at it, it just looks so lovely. Guys, if you would like to keep seeing our easy homemade recipes, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our recipes so that we can keep getting them to you. Remember, keep it simple, be yourself, and I promise you, life can be so much easier. Cooking is as hard as you make it. Thank you all for tuning in for another edition of Homemade.